Welcome to Talks with Summer, seeing the world through the eyes of another, beyond the five senses. Today I have with me Dallisa Hocking, a fifth-generation psychic medium, educator, and consciousness guide. Dallisa helps people develop intuition as a practical, repeatable skill, teaching self-trust, discernment, and inner awareness rather than reliance on external authority. Her work bridges consciousness studies, imagery-based inquiry, and personal reflection, empowering individuals to navigate life from within. Trained by teachers including Tony Robbins, Dr. Raymond Moody, John Holland, and Lee Harris, and certified in energy mastery, mediumship, and advanced tarot studies, Dallisa brings both depth and discipline to her work. She holds a BA from UNLV, a women's entrepreneurship certificate from Cornell University, and is a graduate of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program. She's also the host of The Curious Question and Books That Shift Us. It is my honor to have you today with me, Dallisa. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Summer. Oh my gosh, what a great introduction. I never thought I was going to be a psychic medium. This was not in my plans. But I've owned different businesses over the years, and I'd owned a company about 10 years ago where I was a dating coach and a matchmaker, and I was hosting dating events in different places in the United States. And I was also working at a business school in Texas, and always very much interested in spirituality. My dad's side of the family, my grandmother, for example, and her grandmother were very psychic and could make predictions and see full body apparitions. And so I was very interested in all of that. And 10 years ago, but I had gone last minute to a workshop in New York State at the Omega Institute. And it was a workshop on the study of synchronicity. I mean, how ironic can my life be that I go to a workshop to learn about synchronicity and how everything happens for a reason. And it was actually on that trip, the last night of the trip, where my entire life changed and all of my gifts quite literally dropped in overnight. And that is kind of an interesting story. Would you like me to share it? Yes, I would love to hear more. And I'm sure the listeners would love to hear it too. Perfect. Yeah, because some people are born, this way. And from, very young age, I've heard many, many stories over the years, people that would see ghosts in their bedroom, for example, or they were very sensitive to activity that was happening in the home. I wasn't really like that. I was just more interested in it because my family would always talk about it, but I never thought that it would happen to me. So that last night of my trip in New York, I was sitting at a friend's house who just so happened to have a home near where I had just taken the workshop. And he and I used to work together on a project in Las Vegas. And I just knew him from work, but always really enjoyed his company. And so we were sitting there and talking about life and catching up when his phone rang, and his family had called to let him know that his aunt had unfortunately passed away that day unexpectedly after falling down a flight of stairs. So, of course, I feel terrible for my friend and give him my condolences. And it was late at that point. So he went upstairs and went to bed. And, I went off to the guest bedroom. And I really didn't think too much more of it because I didn't know his family. And I had just gotten done at this retreat meditating for a few days, off and on. So now in hindsight, I realized I was very primed for what was about to happen. So I go to sleep. And while I was sleeping in the dream state, like the astral plane, I see this woman and I immediately know that it's his aunt, even though I've never seen a photo of her. I didn't know anything about her, but I knew, through the use of telepathy and connection of energy that she was the woman that had just passed away. And so I can see her face, her hair, and through the use of telepathy, her mouth did not move. She said to me, "Please tell my nephew I'm okay. I made it to the other side." And, that was basically it in a nutshell. And I wake up the next morning and, we come out of that fogginess of being asleep. And I immediately realized what had happened. And I made the decision, I'm going to go out to the kitchen where my friend was, and I'm going to tell him what happened. And so I did. And he looked right at me and he said, "Well, what did she look like?" And now in hindsight, I realize this was like my first test, And I described her hair, her facial features. He said, "That's her." And what made it even like more miraculous and just left me speechless was a couple of days later, I was at lunch with a friend of mine and I was telling her the story of my trip and this dream that I had and the message that came out. And I said, "Oh, here, I'll show you pictures from my trip." And I reached for my phone and I could see on my phone a thumbnail of a photo. And I dropped my phone. I actually started crying at lunch in the restaurant. My poor friend is like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I said, "This." And I held up my phone to my friend and I said, "This is exactly what this woman, Barbara, looked like just a couple of nights ago when she came to visit me." My friend had gone to her service that day, his aunt's service, and snapped a photo of her that was on display and sent it to me so I could see what she looked like. And it was exactly as she had come to me just a few nights before. So that's what started everything. Because then it's like, okay, if Aunt Barbara, who I didn't know and never met, could come through and deliver a message, like what else has been trying to come through? And once I just said, yes, I'm open to it, I started getting all kinds of information through channeling. And that's what I really started with, was channeling for people, doing binaural beats and listening to it with headphones on and going into that frequency, and then having a piece of paper and just writing the name of the person at the top that had given me permission, and just gone into this meditation and wrote down everything I was seeing, hearing, feeling, putting it all down on the piece of paper, and then telling the person, here's what I got. And then just a lot of people saying, "How did you even know that? Nobody knows that about me." And so that's how it all got started. And that was, over 10 years ago.
Thank you. And I'm so excited to know more of that. But I want to take you back to, where did you grow up? Tell us more about your childhood days. I'm so curious how it was when you were a little child, and what were your senses and what were you feeling, not knowing what was going on.
Yeah, my childhood, I would say, was pretty normal. I grew up in Western Washington State in the Seattle area, and had parents that were working. I had a little brother that I would look after. I would say that there aren't that many memories that I have about any kind of sensitivity when I was a child, but I've always been emotionally sensitive. And now I look back and think about it because, according to my parents, I used to cry a lot when I was little. And I think it was because I was picking up on so much energy that wasn't even mine, just from, somebody that may have come over to visit our house when I was a kid, or, taking me out to a restaurant and not being able to handle all of the energy that was around us. Now, of course, I have the ability to talk about that and how that shows up for me. But as a little kid, I just didn't have the tools to express what was going on, but I always felt everything very, very deeply. And I still do to this day. If somebody started crying and they start getting tears in their eyes, I don't have to know anything about them. I immediately start feeling the emotion in my own body of what I am seeing in the other person. So it's kind of the blessing and somewhat of a curse. Like, the price of being sensitive is being sensitive. Yeah.
Yes. So a question which came to my mind was, because I do so many interviews from this realm and the psychic side of things, and a lot of the guests mention that they were called towards the work they're doing now, that it was not less of a choice, more of something that called them towards that particular work. And I get a little bit of a sense from your story too. So I'm very curious in terms of that space, that did you feel that you were pulled towards that certain direction, or did you consciously also choose that this is the side of life or the side of existence that I'm going to go towards now?
I feel like I didn't have a choice at all. Yes. Because it all dropped in overnight, and really it just flipped on a light switch that I had never had flipped on before. I couldn't see the world the same way after that. And once I started realizing that I could get information on behalf of other people or communicate with people that had passed away, I couldn't move through life the same way. So it required me to really think about, like, who am I? What am I doing for my work? What do I even want to be known for after I've passed away? And really sitting with a lot of those big questions. And frankly, it's something I've been sitting with again very recently, because I think a lot of the industry online, like if you've seen people that make a lot of predictions, and I've been on a lot of these big shows and talked about predictions, there's a lot of fear and a lot of clickbait that happens with these episodes. And I'm not saying that's you, of course, because I love that we get to talk today. But if I find myself going online, let's say, and just kind of scrolling content, there's a lot of fear-based headlines and imagery that's being used. And I've been getting a lot of downloads lately from Spirit about my work and what I'm doing. And one of the headlines with this is Spirit has made it very clear that we've been giving predictions in order to get people prepared for what's about to happen, because there's going to be so much change in the world. But now we're actually in what they refer to as an activation phase. And this is about going deeper within ourselves now. And so the whole landscape around predictions and what do we do with this, right? So for people that do have these gifts and abilities naturally, maybe we're feeling that tap on the shoulder or that nudge to ask ourselves, like, what are we going to do with this information now? And are we using it for the betterment of our communities and the betterment of people? Like, what's our motivation behind making these predictions? So I just felt like I needed to kind of share that as we're talking about, how my work developed and what I'm doing, because I'm really asking very big questions about predictions and our gifts and abilities as psychics and intuitives.
Yes. A couple of questions came to my mind with this, was because if I look back at my journey through this side of things also, I think it started more when I started to do this work and the podcast and finding people who were like-minded, for lack of a better word. It was also something which gave me a lot of relief, because I did not have to anymore hide this part of me. Because going about in normal life, I felt that I couldn't tell anybody, oh, I'm sensing this, or I feel this energy, or I felt my dead relative or my family members. And doing this work today makes me feel that I can be more of myself. So starting from there and then attracting those same people, it's almost sort of like a magnet. So that's what I feel, and I feel I'm still progressing along on that journey. So from the element of prediction, I've often wondered, the future in a certain light is also fixed, because I've always gotten premonition dreams all my life, and then there are things which have not been pleasant which I see, and then they come to pass, and that has always made me question that if the end point or if the future is fixed, then what is the point of all of this if I can't change it, if we are not able to change it? And like, you are getting all these huge downloads, and our humanity is going through a certain change. So what is the point of it? Because if we know this is our destination and this is where we are going to get to, so what is in your personal opinion and in your personal understanding, what is the point and the purpose of the prediction?
And I have head to toe chills as you're talking about that, which is part of my indication in my own body that what you're saying is really important. It's like an exclamation point. Yeah, I think that that's an excellent point that you bring up, and one that I have really been sitting with, because in reflecting in my own work, I did one-on-one sessions for a really long time, and built up quite a big clientele. And there are a lot of people out there that would love to have the business that I built and work with all the clients that I've worked with. But I've really had to ask myself, what am I doing here? Because in some of those sessions, and I think my clients would attest to this, that I really try to leave them better than how they came to me, and really try to talk through what's going on in their life. And, if they're trying to decide between two things, trying to make it so that they have their own authority of making the decision rather than asking me for the answer. But it's come to light that it feels like along the way, something got lost in translation, because I have found more so in the last year, people that have known me for a long time, either, taking one of my classes or being a client, sending me emails and saying, I really need you right now to tell me what to do. And those emails really bother me, because I question myself and what did I do or what did I say that maybe created an opportunity to disempower someone, because they're coming to me for an answer that they already know and they already have inside of them, but they're either looking for permission to make the decision, or they're looking for someone else to tell them that it's going to be okay. And I don't like that feeling. And it's something that is really under my skin these days. And it goes to, there's going to be people, obviously, that are listening to this that are in the spiritual realm of business, or they are a psychic or some kind of healer. And maybe they're hearing this and it's sparking something inside of them that they hadn't thought about before. But I really felt I was approaching this work with the intention of holding space and giving an opportunity for conversation and curiosity. And I think there are more people hooked into the predictive energy than I thought. And whether it's with me or someone else, because if I'm saying no, like, oh, I'm not doing sessions, I'm finding that they want to know, well, then who can I talk to? Who can I go to? Who can you refer me to? And it's deciding, what do I want to be a place for, and what no longer resonates with me. And then it's the question of, well, then I still have these gifts and abilities. What am I supposed to do with them now? If I'm going to change the way that I approach this line of work. Does that make sense?
It does. And something came to my mind, and I think it's very interesting, because I completely get what you're saying. And if I bring it down to a very life level, I have a younger sister, and we talk a lot about, like, we are very close, and we talk about what which direction my hair is going, like very small things. But I was talking to her about this element of I'm single and I'm alone, so I make my decisions myself. And when she's with her husband, and it changes things a little bit when you have someone you can depend on, and you sometimes don't make your own decision. So if I just catch what you're saying, I was discussing it, and I was pointing this out to her for myself. I said that even if for example, for this interview, I decide I want to wear green, I'm getting called to wear green energy. I would call her and I would ask her, I have two options. Which one do you think I should wear? And she would say, wear the pink one. So I'm automatically, my decision and my conviction goes down. For example, I'm taking a hypothetical example. It's already gone to a place where now I need to really decide, do I want to follow my own heart, or do I want to just blindly trust my sister? And she says this. So this is a very tiny example, but I notice this with people and friends and with myself, that the tiniest of things, even should I work out in the morning, should I wash my hair? It's just an example. Sometimes we don't want to use our brain, and there's this fear that if I make my own decision, it's wrong. So we want the other person to make the tiniest of decisions for ourselves, and it's so unconscious these days. I notice with everybody, and I'm changing that about myself, where I still talk to her, but I make sure that I know what Summer wants and what Summer's choice, and then I talk to her and be open to something which she might present to me, which I might not have noticed. But this is what came to me, that this is such a small place where it's difficult for us sometimes to go with the choice that we want. And here people come to you for these big, huge things and a zone of the unknown. So I would probably imagine that it would be very hard for them to find that courage and that conviction that what we think is correct. So they almost what they want from you is a go ahead, or that conviction that you can lend to them that yes, you're on the right path. So I hope I'm making sense, but that's what came to me.
Oh, of course. Yeah, it makes complete sense. I think a lot of it is permission. I like to teach a lot about spirituality and psychic development, and I'm a firm believer that we all have the ability to tap into our intuition and grow that, or even get, like you were saying, premonitions in your dreams, or having visions through your third eye, or feeling things in your physical body. We can all do that. Is not just like a chosen few that get to experience these gifts. Some of us are just born with it naturally, and others develop it like a muscle with anything else that you would learn to develop in your lifetime. But I think that my message at this point, and like what I'm really questioning about my work, is how can I encourage people to go within, to get that authority and permission within themselves without going to someone else to get that stamp of approval, like going back to our own sense of self and what we want. And to your point, Summer, you mentioned earlier about, things being set in stone. So like this whole, it feels like a trap, right? So I think that with a lot of the doom scrolling and the clickbait and the fear-based headlines and imagery, I think it's a pool that we can get sucked into, or an energy vortex that we can find ourselves getting into and moving into without even like really thinking about it. Like those examples you were using about like asking your sister for, which color should you wear? A lot of people are doing that. And even with bigger choices about, should I quit my job? Should I move to Michigan? It's like, do you want to move to Michigan? Do you want to quit your job? And so there's just a lot of questions in there that I am considering at this point.
Yes, I completely get it. So what motivated you to do what you do? Or in other words, how did you take this path in life that you are on? I know you told us about the dream, but is there anything else to share?
I think when that light turned on and I could see the symbolic light and I could see all of these different energies at play, and I realized that I have access to anything that I want to tune into, that was a motivation for me because I'm a very curious person by nature. And I thought, wow, if I can pick up on this one piece about this person's life that they've never told anyone, then my curiosity is leading me to look in all other corners and with all different kinds of people to see what's happening in their energy field or in their life. And maybe I was, in hindsight, was I too nosy, right? Like, was I too curious? Like, was that a motivation where I wanted to learn more about people and their stories? But I think if I'm being really honest with myself, it was more that I was blown away. I was shocked and I was awestruck by what I could access, and not in a way that, of course, it's really interesting when you get something right and then someone tells you that you're right about something. Like, that's always kind of interesting and curious because I was picking up on something that nobody else knew. But I think it was more that I was mesmerized by the fact that we could even do that. That we could get all of this information, that we could communicate with animals and people that have passed away. So I think for the last decade doing this work, I feel like that's been my motivation, is being curious and being really grateful to spirit, to universe, to God, that we even can do this. And so I've really felt like that's been the thread that's carried me through all these years. And those little confirmations, even if they are little, or even the really big ones throughout the years that people have said during sessions, that to me is just confirmation of how magnificent we are and how incredible these gifts really are.
Can you tell us more about your work as a psychic medium? And I know there's so many people who are listening who know very little about it, so I'm sure they would want to know more.
Yeah, so psychic work is predictions. So psychic work would be really looking at past, present, or future. And mediumship is connecting, being a conduit and in between with this world, and I refer to as the other side. And so my work over the last decade, for most of it, it was doing one-on-one sessions, and started off doing them over the phone only. I couldn't even see the person I was talking to. And that's a good test to see if you're really channeling and tuning in, because you can't see any facial expressions or anything. And then it moved into where I was doing work in person, and people would come to the office and I would sit with them and do sessions. And then it got to be so big that I ended up opening up my own space in Las Vegas and working out of that space and having different practitioners and teachers there. And then, of course, you know, everything happens in 2020 where everything got shut down. So I decided to take my company virtual at that point. And so I moved everything online. And so everything I've been doing really over these last 5 years has been primarily online. But most of all, over the last couple of years, it's been teaching classes on Zoom, which have been really fun and interesting. But I'm noticing that more and more of my content is going towards helping people go within as part of that activation phase that we're in now that Spirit had said. So it's like, how can we go deeper inside of ourselves? And that does include intuition and building our psychic awareness. So that's what I've been doing mostly these days. But yeah, most people get psychics and mediums confused because they think maybe it's just all predictions. But psychic work and mediumship work are different. And the vibration you have to hold to do each of those is very different. So we all are radiating at any given moment at a certain frequency, a vibration. And in my experience of it, it usually depends on like our stress level or what kind of emotional state that we're in. So if we're really angry, for example, our vibration can be pretty low. But if we are experiencing in that moment joy, our frequency is going to be higher. The way that I feel like I use my gifts and communicate even with the other side is I have to adjust my frequency, my own frequency. So the higher I can get my frequency, the more information I can channel. And on that scale, psychic information is actually lower in the frequency than mediumship. So it's why you'll often hear about more psychics than you will mediums, because psychic information can be easier to access because you only have to get your frequency so high in order to look at past, present, and future. But if you really want to be able to connect with an energy that has left the earth and is existing on the other side, you have to raise your frequency even higher because they radiate at a high frequency on the other side. And so we have to get as high as we can, and they have to bring their energy down sometimes in order for us to meet in the middle. And frankly, mediumship work, in my experience of it, can feel very exhausting and very heavy because you are tapping in to an energy that is communicating with you from the other side, which has its own frequency. And you're also working with the person or people that want to connect with this loved one. And so you're carrying all of this energy, and they can be incredibly draining to do. And I've just realized, I'd rather teach someone how to fish and how to connect with their loved ones on the other side, or how to connect with their higher self, or how to channel. I'd rather teach you how to do that, because then you can go and do it whenever you want, rather than being dependent on someone else that you think has to be that vehicle.
Yes, I completely get it, because I've lost loved ones, and I think I was always very curious about this side, and I knew about my senses before that, but I think my mother's death was a very big turning point. And I often think about it, other than the first couple of years, which were extremely painful. But I feel like if everybody could connect to their loved ones, in essence, it's extra senses, to put it in a very simplistic way. And then maybe that's the calling, maybe that's the activation, that we can raise our senses to that level where in my belief, we all have more than 5 senses. So if we can become aware of the other ones and accept them, then it would be a very different world that we live in.
Yes. And I think that remembrance is being activated. I think it's part of this new phase that we've entered. Spirit has shown me very clearly that our vibration is shifting and adjusting to those that are open to it, and those that believe that we can achieve these higher frequencies. That doorway is open to us. And so as we raise our frequency into higher activations than maybe we've ever seen while we've been alive here, we will be experiencing telepathy and premonitions and intuitive downloads, much more frequently.
Yes.
And that's really exciting. They've shown me that people that are at that higher frequency will be using telepathy more and more to communicate. It's the example of you're thinking about your sister and then she calls you, right? And
yes.
But having that more and more available to us. But I think that there is also a divide, and there's been many psychics and seers that have seen like a shift or like a polarization with people. And I can sense this because these higher frequencies that I was just describing and having the use of telepathy, that's one side of the equation. But I think there's going to be another side of the equation that is going to look like the breakdown of people and the breakdown of cities and the breakdown of different areas in the world, and seeing things on the news, for example, that could look very scary and cause a lot of fear or even manipulation or control. But I do think that a lot of those things are actually happening in that other frequency. So, for example, seeing things on the news that will be like looting, and riots and fires and things like that, where it will appear very destructive because that's where that frequency is. So I think it's going to be really interesting to notice what happens, because to me, it feels like the two sides of the frequency are getting farther and farther apart. But Spirit has shown that we will all still exist on Earth together, but that we won't necessarily have as much overlap when our frequencies are getting farther and farther apart. But I think there's, like, I'm even seeing psychically as I describe this, that there will be people in the higher frequency that know or even live with people at the lower frequency that don't want to have anything to do with spirituality or frequency or anything. And they're going through their own identity crisis, and people from the higher frequency almost like reaching for people that are at the lower one, trying to like grab them and pull them up. But Spirit has made it very, very clear that there is no judgment around who is at what frequency, but it's really not our job or responsibility to hold or prop people up in a space or a vibration that they don't want to be in. And so then what happens, with all of this content that we see online or news stories, and it's almost as if the two frequencies, just putting it simply, would be consuming different content, and that there's not going to be like a lot of the middle content. So the fear mongering or the clickbait, that's very much like a lower frequency. So it feels like the higher frequency may not even be consuming that much content. Maybe they're going to be out in nature more, or, sitting at home and reading a book. But I think that we're going to see some stark differences between the two sides of the equation.
Yes. How can esotericism be used for personal growth?
I think that there are a lot of tools out there that we can use for our own spiritual growth. So I obviously just talked a lot about how I feel about predictions. However, I do really appreciate these different tools that are available to us. And I think where I personally sit with it is I would like to use these different tools and access them to help me understand myself better. So, for example, I really like astrology. I like the study of it. I like understanding the energy of the planets. But I find myself now, when I am consuming astrology content, I'm listening to it very differently, where I am asking myself, how does this apply to my life?
Yes.
How does this apply to the choices that I am making? And so I'm not looking at it more for, tell me what's going to happen with the world leader of that country based on the astrology chart. I actually want to take it more micro and look at it through the lens of my own life. And you can do that with things like tarot as well, oracle cards, using a pendulum. There's all kinds of things that you can still access and use. But for me, it's more just about asking myself that question of, why am I using this tool, and how is it helping me or elevating me?
Yes.
Versus like, am I consuming this content because I'm afraid of something and I'm looking to someone else to comfort me or to give me clear direction so I can try to make a decision about my own life? They're very, very different motives.
Yes, I was completely thinking the same thing, and I think you were saying it, and I was thinking that. Is there any incident which you would like to share which shaped your life?
Oh gosh, there are so many that I can point to. My grandmother, who I get my gifts from, I'll say she was, she's been passed away for several years now, but one of the most incredible people that I had the pleasure of knowing. And she had a debilitating disease for 30 something years. She's in pain every day of her life. And she always thought about her life in a positive way. And she always talked about the silver linings and the blessings. And she loved to travel. And before the trip was over that she was on, she was already planning the next trip. So why I'm talking about her is because I think there's a lot of things in the world today that we could say are bad or they're heavy. And yes, there is a lot of that on Earth School. Like, this is an advanced classroom. So we're going to see that darkness and that heaviness. But she always had this way of finding the silver linings. And I think she is a great reminder of what we focus on matters. And in any moment of any day, we can choose whatever it is we want to choose to focus on. And even in the hardest of circumstances and the toughest of days, I'm a firm believer that there's always going to be a silver lining. And it's because she had that mindset and she had that positivity that I feel like I can thread that through my life and my messages. Because I think that was one of the reasons she stayed alive for so long. When she was first diagnosed, they gave her, I think, 8 years to live. And she's like, I'm going to prove them wrong, and she just kept living her best life. And one of the things I was even channeling this morning from Spirit was that we're really going to be asked, especially this year, but I feel like it's for the next few years, where are we showing up in our life in a victim mentality or a victim energy? And who are we blaming things on? Because I've noticed in my own self, when I take radical responsibility for myself and how I feel, there's more liberation and freedom in that than I've been able to find in anything else. And so we're being asked to do that work and find those silver linings. And my grandmother Eloise was an excellent example of how we can choose to focus on the good and really questioning, like I said, our attachments or our stories that put us in a victim mentality, and where instead can we decide to shift out of that and take our own power back and go within to free up and feel that liberation inside of ourselves.
Yes. And I was thinking a couple of days back about the concept of pain, because I feel like in essence, everybody is trying to run away from pain by like scrolling and by having a prediction which tells them all the good stuff. So it's in essence, there's this seeking of that everything's okay. Everybody wants to hear everything will be fine. Don't worry about it. And that made me think that maybe it's the pain that's actually the key. And then I almost showed myself that I've always felt that my life's been hard and there's been so much pain, but it's been like a big gift because today I'm closer to myself and I'm more at peace. So maybe we just need to shift our perspective from trying to strive for the happy and the perfect and running away from pain to accepting the pain and see what it's trying to tell us. Maybe it's telling us to change.
The pain can be one of the biggest catalysts that we have in this lifetime. In my experience, like when things are really great, yes. I don't really think I'm learning a whole lot. Like just, I'm enjoying it, but it's when you have that pain and those hardships, those roadblocks, I think that is what really deepens your connection and your relationship to yourself. It strengthens your ability to tap into your own intuition more. your inner strength and resiliency just goes off the charts. And that is what can create that depth within ourselves, is when we're going through the things that we don't necessarily want to go through.
Yes.
But I think that's one of the biggest blessings of being a human.
Yes. Who has been the most influential person in your life, and how have they impacted you? I know you talked about your grandmother, so this question might be coming afterwards.
Yeah, she definitely is at the very top of my list. But I think also what I would want to mention here is I think some of the most influential people are the ones that I didn't necessarily get along with or enjoy being around. Whether that's a boss at a corporate job that I just couldn't stand to work for, or it could be a difficult friendship that is ending in a way that feels heartbreaking. Those relationships that have the heaviness or the stickiness, or they bring up those low vibration feelings, those are some of the most influential relationships that I've had. Even the people, throughout the years, because, I've been very public figure. There are some people that really just don't like me, right? And even those people, in a way, I'm grateful for, because they taught me how to love myself more. And like I said a second ago, when things are really great,
yes,
you might not learn a whole lot from it. And so there's many people that I am beyond grateful that have been in my life. But I think it's the ones that are the trickiest that I've had to learn and navigate through, and really not been graceful with a lot of them at the time. But in hindsight, realizing why they were in my life and what I needed to learn and being humble about it, that's really created the most impact in my life. And I'm of the belief that we have soul contracts that we decide on before we ever are born. And those relationships are intended to teach us the most about ourselves and our life and our choices. And those usually are not the easy relationships.
yes,
They're usually the ones that really get you angry or upset or sad. And I would just encourage anybody listening to this, if they're like, wait, what? We're supposed to be happy about those people? I have tried to shift my perspective on it and ask myself, okay, if I selected this relationship before I was born for the lessons and the growth opportunity, what was it about this person and this relationship that I was supposed to learn? And see it through that perspective of them being a guide and a teacher, rather than just the person that did XYZ that you're really angry at. What was it that I was supposed to get out of that and learn? And that's really helped to forgive myself, forgive other people, and really realize that we're all just here walking each other home and doing the best we can.
What do you feel the purpose of life is for you? Or in other words, what do you feel is your personal quest in life?
Oh, gosh. I feel like we are here to learn the most that we can. I really feel like this is an advanced classroom. Yes. And so for me personally, I really try to approach it as that advanced classroom and trying to learn everything I can along the way. I would like to have the choice after this incarnation of whether I'm going to come back or not. So I'd rather learn it while I'm here.
Yes.
So I've learned to go within myself about everything, and be my own best friend. And so I think that has been the purpose of my life. I hope, in taking that off into a bit of a tangent, I hope that my legacy is one where there are people that think about me in a way where I helped them be a better version of themselves. And I really hope that I'm doing that work in a way that sticks, and that becomes a ripple in their life and the people around them. Help make the world better than how I found it. And I won't be able to do everything by myself to do that throughout the whole world, but I can make an impact on my own inner circle, my own community. And I would rather be known for someone that tried than someone that was really good about sitting at home under the blanket, that I was out there actually trying. So that's my quest.
Is there any book, quote, or philosophy that has shaped your outlook on life?
Yes. There is a book called The Power of TED by David Emerald. And this book changed the way that I saw relationships. And I mentioned the download from Spirit recently about questioning where we have victim mentality. That book, I read it several years ago, and I remember when I started reading it, it's a really thin, quick book to read, but I started like highlighting and like earmarking the pages. And then I realized like I earmarked every single page in the book just about. But it got me to open my eyes to something that I hadn't seen in myself. And it's the rescuer-victim dynamic, the relationship between people that like to rescue other people or come to their aid or help them. And that typically they will attract people into their life that are victims, because the rescuers help the victims and then the victims get to be rescued. And so it's this back and forth and back and forth. And I had never really thought about that before. And then you can't unsee it. So then you start to look at all of your relationships and all of the choices that you have made. And I really identified with being a rescuer. And I started to notice that in my work and my profession. And I've subsequently seen it with this industry, the spiritual industry, where, including myself, but I've seen it with a lot of people where they get into the business because they want to be a healer. They want to help people. And this could also apply to somebody that's like a doctor or a nurse, for example. So somebody that identifies with wanting to be a healer or a helper. So they get into the profession because they really want to do that. And then they don't understand, like, why do I have all these people around me that like don't want to take accountability for themselves, and they always have a problem and they're always coming to me for help? And so once I saw that, I'm like, oh my gosh, because it's rampant in the spiritual industry, in my experience of it. But I don't think people go into it thinking, I'm going to be the rescuer and I'm going to attract all these victim energies in. Like, I don't think they do that. I think they go into it very pure-hearted, wanting to just help people. But then they wonder why their own energetic battery is running low and they feel burnt out all the time. It's because they have all these victim energies around them. And so that was very eye-opening. So The Power of TED by David Emerald, that would be one that I would say everyone should read. But I would get the physical copy so you can make all your notes like I did.
Thank you so much. I've suffered from that rescuer mentality too, until I actively started to notice it in every relationship. And I think I went into that zone too, where I thought, okay, I'm questioning the relationship, even if it's not there now, so that I don't go into that zone again.
Exactly.
So I get it. Is there any advice you would give your younger self looking back at your life now?
Yeah. Love yourself. Love yourself. I really have had to work on self-worth in this incarnation. And I've looked at other lifetimes that I've had, and it's been a theme in other ones as well, where I felt worthless. And my younger self really wanted to be loved and appreciated by other people and seen as valuable and seen as either, pretty or smart or whatever it was, right? And I anchored a lot of my own worth based on what other people thought of me. And it took me a long time to figure that out. I probably actively started working on it about over 10 years ago, where I started to recognize that I was doing it and I was giving my power away to other people, just looking for love and approval. And so from my, very, very young days all the way up through the last decade, I'd say, gosh, girl, love yourself. Like, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Like, speak your mind, say what you need to say. Don't be afraid if people like you or they don't like you. Go live your best life. Stop caring so much about what other people think. It would have been so freeing for me to have learned that earlier on. But I think it's also why a lot of people that come to me as a student, let's say, or they want to work with me one-on-one, it's because they don't understand their value. And there's some part of their life where they're lacking worth. And once we can get that adjusted and dialed in, then things start changing. But some people don't want to change. They like the idea of feeling lovable and worthy inside of themselves, but then they also, on some level, understand that when I choose myself and I love myself fiercely and I want to share what I have to say, that ultimately starts shifting some of the relationships in our life. And what we once accepted as okay, maybe for the validation or love that we received from that maybe those relationships end up shifting as well.
Yes, and it brought to my mind that like we have the rescuer mentality, we also have someone who wants to be rescued. So it goes in the other direction at times then. So
yes.
it's important to let that go too. If it were an ideal world, what does that look like in your eyes?
An ideal world would be one where we can get back to basics, where we can have a simpler life. I often have this daydream about building a tiny house village and just living in a tiny house and having a garden plot and beautiful flowers and having some kind of micro community that all lives in the tiny house village together. I know that kind of sounds like kumbaya, but I think that as much as we have incredible things that we have access to in our lives today, and AI and technology is going to go completely next level and change all kinds of things, I think my ideal world would include more heart-to-heart connections and more connections between people and community. And I think that I would live in a tiny house.
What is something that you would like the world to know about you, which you feel is often misunderstood?
Oh, what is misunderstood about me? Maybe the level of which I sit and think about everything. I do a lot of interviews and make a lot of content on social media and things like that. I talk a lot about spirituality and the other side. But I think at the end of the day, I'm just a person trying to get through life and learn the best that I can and then do better tomorrow. I love the simple things, like going to a thrift store and buying books and reading those books and sitting with myself. I actually spend more time alone than people may think. They might get this perception of me being outgoing and I'm around a lot of people, but I really thrive on alone time. And so I love being in my own company.
From your entire journey in life so far, what would you like to share with our listeners which you feel would be helpful to them?
There's a poet, Rumi, that I'm sure a lot of your audience has heard of. And there's just this quote coming to mind. The wound is the place where the light enters. And another one is live life as if everything is rigged in your favor. And those two quotes really stick with me because, like we've talked about today, the wound is the place where the light enters. It's like whatever that dark cave is, whatever that pain or that challenge is, there is light that comes in to that wound that is meant to help us grow and evolve and become better versions of ourselves. And then the other one, live life as if everything is rigged in your favor. That's recognizing that everything, the good, the bad, and everything in between is actually working out for you. And so instead of being a victim of your own life, it's asking yourself, why did this person or this situation show up in my life? And what am I supposed to get from this? And so I often go back to those two quotes.
Thank you so much, Dallisa. This was most wonderful. And I didn't mention it at the beginning of the interview, but I saw you in a dream a few months back. So when you reached out, I did not recognize you immediately, but as soon as you came on today, it just hit me that I'd already seen you in a dream. So this is most wonderful and an example of what we're doing. And I felt each and everything that you said, and I'm sure the listeners will too. So thank you.
Thank you, Summer. I enjoyed our conversation, and I hope to do it again soon.